Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, my name is Melanie Waxman, and on behalf of the Attitude team, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's ADHD Experts presentation titled, For Educators, Research-Based Tactics for Improving Executive Functioning in Teens. Leading today's presentation is Brandon Slade. Brandon is the founder and CEO of Untap Learning, an executive function coaching organization that he started after teaching special education for 12 years. Untap's mission is to help students with executive function challenges to develop the skills they need to succeed academically and beyond. Today's webinar covers the critical topic of supporting students with ADHD at school and the role executive function plays in their success. Our expert will share valuable insights and proven strategies to help students establish consistency and accountability so that educators are primed and ready to support teens who learn differently. We'd like to begin today's webinar by asking this poll question to our live audience. What executive function challenge do you see most often in the classroom? Please select your answer and comment in the text box under the video player to tell us more. For answers to common webinar questions about slides, transcripts, and certificates of attendance, click on the FAQ tab of your webinar screen. And if you are listening in replay or podcast mode, please visit attitudemag.com and search podcast number 464 to access the webinar resources. And if you support the work we're doing here at Attitude to strengthen the ADHD community, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for Attitude Magazine for yourself or to share with a teacher or a loved one who could benefit from greater ADHD understanding. You can click on the magazine tab on screen to learn more. And you also don't want to miss Attitude's free ADHD learning series for educators. This 9-part newsletter training will guide educators through a comprehensive understanding of ADHD in children, plus how to effectively address its symptoms at school in ways that build brains and self-esteem. Click the link on screen or visit attitudemag.com/newsletters to sign up. And finally, the sponsor of today's webinar is Brain Balance. Brain Balance is an integrated cognitive development program designed to help kids, teens, and adults with ADHD, learning differences, anxiety, and beyond improve focus, attention, and behavior. Brain Balance creates a customized plan based on your child's needs to support their social, emotional, and academic growth. An exploratory study with Harvard's McLean Hospital found the Brain Balance program to be as effective as low-dose stimulant medication in alleviating ADHD symptoms in children. Scan the QR code on screen or visit brainbalance.com to learn about Brain Balance today. Attitude thanks our sponsors for supporting our webinars, and sponsorship has no influence on speaker selection or webinar content. So without further ado, I'm so pleased to welcome Brandon Slade. Thank you so much for joining us today, Brandon, and leading this discussion, and I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, no, what an honor it is to be here. Attitude is something that for myself, I have relied on just so many times, and then as an educator and helping kids. So what an honor it is to be here and so grateful to help. So here's what we're going to go through today. My goal of today is to give everyone, whether it's a teacher or a parent or a coach, as many concrete strategies as possible. A lot of times when we talk about this ADHD research or executive function challenges, we're kind of talking high level. My goal is to come at it much more low level. So meaning what routines can we implement in our classroom? What can we do at home? What can we do as coaches and mentors and everything else? What are the day-to-day things we can do to help our kids thrive? So here's what we're going to go through today. I'm going to give a quick background on myself. I know this is typically a very educated crowd who listens to these, but we're going to talk about what executive function or executive functioning is. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about it, and we want to go back through about what it is and what it is not. We're going to talk about the great news about these executive function skills. They can be developed. It takes a lot of time, hard work, 2 pats on the back, 1 kick in the tail, but we know that they can be developed. Next, we're going to talk about how we can support our kids or support our students. We're going to talk about how we can organize our practices if we're a coach, how we can organize our classrooms, and what we can do to make sure we create an environment where our kids thrive. And then we're going to talk about how to do school. So many times people like me, we don't know the game or the rules of school. We just don't know how to do school where a good student, quote unquote, intuitively gets how to do school. So we're going to talk about what we can explicitly teach our kids to make sure they thrive in the academic setting. So here's a quick background on me. I was raised in Boulder County, Colorado, and I was diagnosed with ADHD, hyperactive ADHD at the age of 5 years old. I have the best type of ADHD. I'm 99th percentile hyperactive. I have 2 brothers who are built just like myself. The reason I describe it as the best type of ADHD is because we were the type of kids who were jumping on desks in kindergarten and so rambunctious, but we were getting attention. What breaks my heart is that there's so many of us who go through life, whether it's 20, 25, 30, and we know something's kind of wrong. I know we talk to people all the time, and we know something's kind of wrong in the background, but we don't get that diagnosis till much later and get that understanding. That was definitely not me. I had teams of people coming to watch me and trying to figure out how do we help this kid. So I was hyperactive ADHD diagnosed very early on. With that obviously came academic struggles. Whether it was a 504 plan or an IEP throughout elementary, middle school, and high school, I didn't do great. I struggled significantly, but I was able to get through. It wasn't until I left high school and I went out to Ohio on a football scholarship and completely bombed that I started to really work on these executive function skills and had to work myself back into school and really develop these skills and an understanding of what these are. I was able to make it through college, and while I was in grad school for my master's in special education and to become a school psychologist, I taught in Boulder Valley School District for 10 years. I taught in many different settings, but primarily I was a special education teacher in 8th grade, and I work with my kids helping them transition from middle school to high school and beyond. And so a lot of experience with what we're going to talk about today. I also did a lot of work as a school psychologist. And then a few years ago, we kind of accidentally started something called Untapped Learning. We work with several hundred kids in the Boulder County area. We have, a warehouse with movement space and classrooms and ways in which our kids can come in and really work on these executive function skills. We also work with college kids across the country. And then we help train teachers and professors how they can set up systems for their kids with executive function deficits to thrive. We work with companies like Lululemon to help managers and work with their employees. And so we're really working hard on a lot of these executive function skills and how we help these people discipline their gift. So let's talk about what executive function skills are. Like I said, there's some misconceptions, but the most basic definition that I really come back to is it's the complex set of cognitive processes that all work together so you can achieve your goals. Your goal may be something big, like I want to make the varsity soccer team, or I want to be star of the musical. It's your executive function skills that break down that big goal into daily actionable steps and help you get there. But your goal also might be something small, like how do I get out of the door on time in the morning? Or how do I pay attention in class? Whatever the goal is, it's your executive function skills that break that goal down and help you transition between tasks to get to that end goal. Here's what comprises your executive function skills: time management, organization, focused attention, impulse control, task initiation, emotional regulation, cognitive flexibility, planning and problem solving, verbal and working memory, and metacognition, which is just a fancy word for self-assessment. Throughout this presentation, we're going to talk a lot about time management, focused attention, and task initiation. Quick note on task initiation. In the past couple of years post-pandemic, this is the skill that we've seen absolutely plummet with our students. It seems like getting started on the task, especially as an educator, getting kids started is at least 50% of the lift, as before it wasn't as high. There's a lot of things we can do to help our students get started. Also, a quick note on organization. As parents or instructors or tutors, if we can focus on the organization of the content or the organization of the problem, we see a lot of our students with executive function deficits thrive. How this looks is, let's say a student is entering and struggling with Algebra 1. If we can help our students line up the equal signs, keep them in a straight row so they don't get lost in the numbers, and discipline that part of the instruction, well, then a lot of times we see kids thrive. Maybe we don't need remediation. We just need to focus on organization of the problem or organization of the content. Same thing, I know when we struggle with task initiation with large things like a research paper or a presentation, what we can do as instructors is even helping our students organize their slides and titling each slide on the Google slide or the PowerPoint. Well, then they have structure and they're working downhill. So there's a lot we can do with organization of the content that really helps our kids thrive. When we talk about who struggles with these skills, these are the core populations we're talking about. Obviously, ADHD. Slam dunk, if you have ADHD, you're going to have an executive function deficit at some time in your life, and you're going to need to work on these skills. With dyslexia, we know about the phonetic piece, but often, we see our kids struggle with these executive function skills, and especially because their thoughts are disorganized, and we need some instruction and some structure around these skills. Students on the spectrum, and then something we've seen a lot recently is what we call twice exceptional students with a gifted IQ or gifted intellect. They really tend to be scattered and struggle with these skills in a lot of settings. And then if you have a TBI or a concussion, if you work with athletes, a lot of times these are the skills that during the recovery period we really need to work on. So we have those populations. And then on top of that, we look at our mental health, whether it's anxiety or depression. We really need to work these skills and help students break down tasks into small manageable pieces while they're working on that mental health. This graphic, or the way I spoke to, is really nicely laid out. In the real world, we see up to as high as 80% of people with ADHD also have some kind of significant anxiety associated with it. So in real life, it doesn't break down this nicely, but these are really the core populations we're talking about with an executive function deficit. The way I think about executive functioning is making toast. So growing up, like I said, I had two rambunctious brothers and myself. My mom would give us a very simple task, or something she thought was simple. Put some butter on some toast and meet me in the car in 5 minutes. She would come back in the house about 10 minutes later, and we were wrestling. There was bread spread out all over the place. My youngest brother was covered in butter, and we were trying to tackle him. Obviously, we were very rambunctious, and my mother would lose her mind on us. But she thought she was giving us a very simple task. Put some butter on some toast and meet me in the car in 5 minutes. When you break down that task and you look at everything that consists of that task, so first you have to take out the bread, then you have to plug in the toaster, then you have to set the toaster, then you have to put the bread in, take the butter out of the fridge, and we see all the way down to having butter on some toast. There's a lot of small steps needed to get to that end goal. We had difficulty transitioning between those steps to get to our end goal. When I was a teacher, I thought I would give my kids a very simple task. Get your presentation to me by Thursday. Get your research paper to me by Friday. It wasn't until I figured out how to break down that task into very small, manageable pieces, give them love and accountability throughout the process, 2 pats on the back, 1 kick in the tail, that I started to see my students really not only develop these skills, but complete work. That's why these kids can be exhausting. But remember, it's not like this forever. If we can break things down, hold them accountable along the way, we tend to see a lot of growth in these skills. So that's what executive functioning is. Some quick misconceptions about people that struggle with these skills. First of all, and this one is started to become dispelled a lot more recently, but students with executive function deficits are not intelligent. I know with our population that we see, we have a lot of their neuropsych reports, and often this could not be further from the truth. So many of these students are so intelligent, but they do struggle with these skills. The two are not correlated, and we always get the feedback that we do struggle with these skills throughout school. So we believe we're not intelligent. When I give parent presentations, one of the first questions I get is, why can my kid or why can my teenager play video games until his eyes bleed, but he cannot do a simple task like open up a textbook and read 1 chapter, or he can't do a math worksheet? Is my student lazy? Is my student unmotivated? And we kind of go off from there. Well, the answer is not really. Our brains are just constructed differently. We have lower than typical amounts of dopamine in our prefrontal cortex. What that means is that tasks that we don't find very exciting, we really struggle starting. But the opposite is also true. something that we do find exciting and get a lot, and we see a lot of value in, we have this gift of hyperfocus, and we get in really deep into it. That's why you see so many adults who talk about when their ADHD is a gift, they talk about this gift of hyperfocus. School rewards you for being a generalist, being good at 6 or 7 different classes or 6 or 7 different subjects. In the real world, a lot of us really get rewarded to going deep into one thing. So we're not lazy, we're not unmotivated, we still need to figure out the system, and we need to figure out how to reverse engineer it so we can be successful, but our brains are constructed differently. And then finally, students who struggle with executive function skills are not successful in life. I've seen some studies, 60 to 80% of our CEOs, entrepreneurs have this thing where they have an executive function deficit at some time in their life. You see it all the time where people talk about the gift of their dyslexia, how their brain works different, or an ADHD, or how anxiety helped them thrive. So this could not be further from the truth. So there are a few misconceptions. The great news about these skills is that they can be developed. I know I thought you were either born organized or disorganized. They can be developed. Again, it takes a lot of hard work and practice, but they can. So here are some of the mindsets that we've helped our students with that have really landed well. The first one, and I'm always amazed by who this lands with. I thought it would land with a very specific group of kids, but it tends to land with almost all of our kids. The Navy SEALs have a saying, and Jocko Willink made it famous: discipline equals freedom. If you are disciplined, you have twice as much freedom. So here's how this plays out in real life for a lot of our students. If one of our students in college is disciplined enough to give up 30 minutes of their own time to go to office hours, well, that saves them an hour and a half to 2 hours on the back end. By the time they initiate the task, figure out what to study, maintain attention, and completely follow through, they actually save a lot of time. If I'm disciplined enough to get my movement in the morning, we know that movement has a high correlation with attention, learning, memory, and retention. I have the freedom of that the rest of the day. If we're disciplined enough to lay our clothes out before bed, we have a lot of freedom in the morning. We see this over and over. As an educator, if I was disciplined enough to have a weekly plan posted on my Google Classroom, Schoology, Canvas, D2L, whatever that looked like, if I was disciplined enough to have that on Sunday night, well, I had the freedom of less emails from parents, from the special education teachers, from the counselors, from the interventionists, because everybody knew what I was doing and everyone could be with me. If we have disciplines, a lot of freedoms open up. Our kids really respond to this because we're all after freedom to do what we love, whether it's athletic or Minecraft or music or art or whatever, we are after our freedom. So this has landed for a lot of us. The next mindset that works, and this tends to land well with educators and sometimes not as much with parents, but we look at what really helps, research-based, what really helps develop these executive function skills. If you look at the bottom of the pyramid, or if you're just listening, what really helps give you the most bang for your buck on improving these executive function skills are sleep, exercise, routines, and structure. Those are the big four. Out of Dr. John Rady's book, Spark, we see that 15 minutes of intense exercise, so 15 minutes of getting your heart rate above 75% of resting, shows just as a correlation just as strong as Adderall for attention, learning, memory, and retention. Exercise is the miracle drug right now for students with these executive function challenges, and figuring out how we can make sure we get that daily is very important. Same thing with sleep and structure and social interactions like we spoke about. So those are the core that we really want to work on first before we move up to things like organizational tools or accommodations. Accommodations can be very helpful and they're very needed, but all the extra time in the world will not be as helpful as getting a good night's rest. If we're sleep deprived, doesn't matter what the accommodation that we have is. So we want to start at the bottom first, and then we want to work our way up. The next mindset that really works with a lot of us adults working with students, whether it's educators or parents, and this is from an Attitude article, is students with executive function challenges tend to get, on average, 20,000 more negative comments than positive comments by the age of 10, and then it tends to go up exponentially from there. We're constantly getting negative feedback. The research shows us 2 positive comments to 1 negative comment is the ideal combination. Now, as being a parent and being a teacher, especially in months like November and February, I feel like I'm having a great day if I say 1 positive comment to 2 negative comments. But if we can get 2 to 1 positive to negative, we see that relationship build with the child, and we see them stay with us to do the hard work needed to be successful. 2 to 1 positive to negative is ideal. We say it through 2 pats on the back, 1 kick in the tail. Love, love, accountability. And here's the slide I'm actually most passionate about. And the last mindset we're going to go through is, and this is taken from the 2020 World Economic Forum job reports. If I were to look at this chart and I were to take this back to 1980, what employers were looking for was people who could follow a task reliably over and over and over. Those are the people they were really after. When we're looking to 2025, what employers are really looking to hire, and the most valuable members of our society are people who think differently, people who are innovative, people who can do complex problem solving and look at problems in a different way. We're starting to see this now, but anything that can be automated will be automated in the future. A lot of our students with executive function challenges or who are neurodiverse have the ability to be the most valuable people in our society. This is who we are really after. We're looking for people who, if they discipline their gift, can look at problems differently. So those are the mindsets we go after. Let's talk about how to support students in the classroom, what we can do as educators. And I'll try to weave in some parenting and some coaching in here as well, because it's all the same research and they all intertwine. But let's talk about the concrete things we can do to really help our kids. With any behavior change, we know that behavior change is hard. So we have to see benefits that far outweigh the work we're going to have to do. So what I'm going to advocate for right now, if you are a teacher and educator, you will see that there's lower student confusion, increased engagement in class. You're going to spend less time chasing missing assignments, collaborating with different people throughout the building, and more opportunities for your students to succeed. If you're a school or a university, we've started to work with a lot of universities. What we're really after is higher graduation rates, increased neurodivergent student success, and to reduce the strain of the already strained resources at the school. We know we don't have anywhere close to the help we need to really help these kids. We're going to try to reduce that strain a little bit. With everything that we are going to talk about, and being a former special education teacher, I am terrified of learned helplessness. We want to support heavily up front. So when we talk about teaching a student how to advocate, we want to role play with them, and we want to practice, and we want to give them a lot of help up front, but then ease off over time and then let them take it. It's really important that we ease off and we don't enable our kids, or we don't want to have this learned helplessness thing that a lot of people in my profession tend to see over time. So there's 2 things we can do that give us the most bang for our buck. The first one is routines. So the brain is electric. Electricity goes down the path of least resistance. If we can develop a routine, then the task starts to go on autopilot. We see the research shows us significant reductions in stress and anxiety for students that have routines. So for example, if a kid walks into a classroom and they know exactly what's expected of them right when they walk in, we know that we're going to see significant reduction in stress and anxiety in that classroom. If you're a coach and you're working with a high-level group of athletes, if we have the same routines built out throughout practice, significant reduction in stress, anxiety, and improved performance. Routines also increase focus and organization. I know one of our biggest recommendations for college kids is that we are in the same location, same time, same place when possible, every single day for studying. So whether it's the campus library or the local coffee shop, if you are disciplined enough to use that location for one thing and one thing only, and that's productivity, disciplined enough to stay off social media and stay off your phone, well, it doesn't matter how poor your attention is, we see significant increase in focus and organization. And then everything we're talking about is best practice for all students, but essential if you have an executive function deficit. All of it is done through the lens of school, but it's not about school at all. We're really after confidence and discipline. And these translate throughout so many aspects of our life. So here's an example of a routine that I had to implement in my own life. And we'll talk about how to identify these routines in a second. But I'm late to everything. And luckily I was on time to this today, but I'm late to everything. And I had a consistent challenge in my life, and I had to build a routine around that in order to be successful. As an adult with an executive function deficit, I have to be incredibly routine-based. So you can see I have a bowl when I walk in the door. Every night when I walk in the door, my wallet, my keys, and my phone land there. That's my landing pad. In the morning, I scoop and I launch. That's my launching pad. Everything is right there. My clothes are laid out, my smoothie's in the fridge, and my backpack is packed next to the door. This helps me get out the door on time in the morning. Doesn't matter how poor my daughter's attention is that day or what's going on in my life, I can get everything up and out the door within 5 to 10 minutes. If I get out the door late and I'm late to the next thing, that means I messed up the night before. It's on me. So we have a consistent challenge and we build a routine around it. One of the ways to think about this is what's called the lead domino. We want to do one routine only at a time. So when we look at the lead domino, it's what's one thing that you can do that helps improve 5, 10 other things. It's also called a keystone habit in the habit research. But for example, if you get your 15 minutes of exercise in, well, that improves learning, it improves sleep, it improves you don't feel like eating like junk. All these other things improve because you implemented one routine. It's the lead domino. This is a lead domino for me. I'm not starting out my morning anxious, running around, blaming everybody else because I lost my keys. I'm getting off the day to a solid start and a bunch of other things improved. Again, one routine at a time. We build that, we automate it, and then we work from there. As a teacher, routines we can build into our classroom. So the first thing is that the key to a neurodiverse friendly classroom is predictability. We want to have routines. A lot of teachers and educators will push back saying like, well, won't this make my classroom boring? Well, the opposite is true. If we know what's expected of us, you can actually let your creativity thrive. There's been a lot of research done on the most creative people of our time, whether it's Da Vinci or Picasso or whoever. They actually, a lot of them, if you read their biographies, had very strict routines. So for example, Picasso was in his lab from noon to 8 every single day. He had very clear structures and routines. That was his creative painting time. What happened within that, it allowed his creativity to flourish. He didn't always have like, when am I going to paint today or waiting for, a spark of innovation. He had clear routines for himself and the creatively flourishes. That's what I'm going to advocate for teachers. If we have clear routines and kids know exactly what's expected, your assignments can be much more exciting, much more engaging, and you're not behavior managing as much. So having clear routines. Identifying your lead domino. An example for a lead domino for me as a teacher is I had to teach my students how to enter my classroom. When you have 20 to 25 ADHD students walking into your 7th period class, it tended to get crazy. And I started off the class day or the class period, always frantic, trying to get everyone going. It wasn't until I explicitly taught them how to enter my classroom and what to get started on every single day that so many other things improved. That was my lead domino. The ultimate lead domino, which we'll talk about in a sec, is making sure you have online, you're organized online and everyone can access your materials. So you create a routine around that lead domino, you do it until it becomes habit, and then we see behavior, attention, and engagement increase. So that's routines. Routines are very, very helpful, whether you're a teacher working with these students or whether you're a parent or a coach. Routines, unbelievably helpful. The next one is planning. The second biggest bang for our buck is planning. So planning may sound simple, but it actually starts to train our brain to think ahead. I'm the type of person, and we work with many of these people as well, that if we have a soccer game on Thursday night and a research paper due on Friday, we will lose our mind at 9 p.m. and blame everybody else in the world because how are we supposed to get this done? We aren't thinking ahead, and we need to train our brain to think ahead. It also puts out a lot of fires before they begin when we plan. Prevents procrastination because we feel like we know exactly what's expected of us, and then it reduces anxiety. Remember, the brain is for having ideas, not holding them. Once we get this out and onto paper and somewhere, we tend to see anxiety go down significantly. If you would like a step-by-step plan, whether you're a special education teacher, a counselor, if you have a small group of students or a parent, this is how we help our students create a plan for the week. A lot of this is age dependent. Obviously, if they're younger, then we make it much more simple. But when they get older, here's how we break this down. And we see them thrive when they get to the next level, whether that's college, the trade school, or the workforce. So a great routine is to do this on Sunday night, let's say 6 p.m. at the kitchen table. That's just what we do every single night. We plan. We look at our week ahead and we see if there's going to be any challenges that we need to work ahead on. So first thing we do is we list out all our commitments for the week, whether it's doctor's appointments, sports, clubs, practices, band, whatever. We get all that out first. The next step is we go through all of our teachers' portals and we see what's posted and we start to look for the large assignments and the small assignments. For the large assignments, we're going to break it down into small pieces, like making toast. And then we want to make sure we have checkpoints in there in case things go wrong. Next, we want to have our kids not only write down these, but we're going to have them give a general time estimate. As you know, especially with ADHD, we see time very differently. Someone asks me, how long will this paper take me? I'll say 20 minutes or I'll say 15 hours, and I'm very off on each one. And this causes a bunch of issues. It takes time to get this down. But if we can start to give general time estimates, we can start to see how they match up and we start to gain an understanding of time. Then we look at front loading. I know as an adult with ADHD, by the end of the week, it's very hard for me to maintain attention. Attention is a depleting resource. So I front load and we work with a lot of our students to front load as much as possible. We get worn down. It's twice as hard for us to focus in some settings. There's a lot going on, especially when you look at sensory challenges. We want to front load when possible. It gives us bumper room. It gives us increased freedom. And we want to build in accountability checkpoints. Where do we get that love if we work through our Monday list? Where does the positive come in and what's the accountability if we don't? So that's how we help our students create a plan. Here's an example of a sample plan. Now, this is a senior in high school who is trying to go to a very high-level university and is also involved in sports and extracurricular activities. So this is much more busy than most plans. You can see it has 5 to 7 different tasks per day. If you start this with a student who's in elementary school, we'll only have probably 2 to 3 tasks each day, and it's such a great way to start this off. So here's the plan. We post it in somewhere that they can see, and it's very clear what the love and what the accountability is if we get through each day. Quick note, if you have you're working with a student with high levels of anxiety, I know what we do is this would be way too overwhelming for me to attack. Getting all this down, first of all, it's great to get it out of the brain because all this was in there, but looking at each day seems really overwhelming. So I know what we do is we send automatic emails where they get 1 day at a time. Or if you're more old school, we just cut up the sheets of paper and you just get 1 day at a time. You take this large undertaking of a week and you break it into small, manageable steps and give them a lot of love. And we've seen anxiety go down significantly with that. So that is what is executive functioning. That is the mindsets we need to help develop these skills. And then routines and planning, which will give us the 2 most bang for our buck. We'll dive into much more detail, but I want to take a quick break because a lot of people asked very high-level, great questions, and I want to address a few of them very quickly. So the first question that was submitted was, my student makes a to-do list but still can't follow it. So they're planning, they're doing great work like what we talked about. What will help him or make him follow this schedule? Obviously, it's hard, a big picture question like this because it's different for every child. I'd want to dig in more deep to give the best possible answer. But a few things to consider right here if this is you. There's a lot of great texts out there. Atomic Habits is the one that's most famous, but Tiny Habits is by a Stanford behavioral researcher. It's breaking down the task into the smallest manageable piece. That was a really helpful book for me with executive function challenges to figure out how to break a task down into a very small piece. And then once you get started, we tend to feel really good and it aids task initiation. So often we feel overwhelmed and that's why we don't get started. So that may be a great thing for you to look into. The second side of it, which I spoke to, was having very clear expectations. So what time do we start our homework every single night? What is the positive? What is the positive that happens if we make it through our work or even if we get started? And what is the accountability for incompletion? So positive could be something along the lines of for every day you get through, you get 15 minutes out extra with friends on Friday night. Or the accountability could be you have to go to office hours or the teacher study session the following morning if we don't complete this. It's not punitive, but it's very clear to us with executive function challenges what's expected of us. We do not do well with gray. has to be black or white or very clear up front, or we will argue our way through it, around it. We just need to have the clear black and white, what's expected of us. And then we want to weave in structure wherever possible. Of course, having an executive function deficit like an ADHD, we fight structure more than anything in the world. That's because we need it so much. Structure, structure, structure. That could look like office hours. It could look like talking to your school for an academic support class. It looks different in every setting. But whenever we can weave in structure and take a lot of that challenge off the parent, it's really helpful. So that's a great list. That's a great question about getting started and actually completing the to-do list. Lots of love, lots of accountability. The next question is, I'm looking to learn strategies to teach my students to help them to be more successful in college level courses while not having the same level of support that they did in high school. It always feels weird giving, recommendations based on this question because you're talking to someone who just bombed college right out the gate in this. But here's what we see. So first of all, campus involvement. One of the highest indicators of student retention and staying on campus and not going on academic probation or failing out or whatever is, do you have a reason to be there? Are you involved in campus? Whether that's clubs, Greek life, a sport, whatever. If you are involved in campus, a lot of times we find a way to get it done because that's why we're there. So before any of this happens, making sure that they get involved in campus in some capacity. The second piece is when you go from a very unstructured environment, when you go from a structured environment, like living at home in high school, to an unstructured environment like college and just being on campus with no one, watching over you, we really struggle with that transition. I would argue that's the biggest transition in nearly anyone's life is going from living at home to living on a college campus. Everything from there is just kind of stair-stepping up. So how do we build in structure? I'm the biggest component of or advocate of office hours. So helping our kids go to office hours and understanding how to talk to professors and understanding how to prepare for office hours before they go is essential, whether it's campus tutoring. Every campus has different resources, but getting involved in those academic resources, you could have something like a mentor. I know we mentor students at different college campuses, but what we're really looking for is routines. How do we implement structure and routines? That's what's really going to help here during this transition. And then the last question is, my 16-year-old wears her ADHD diagnosis as an armor of a disability. Instead of attempting to seek solutions, she uses the refrain of, I can't do the task because I have ADHD. How do we as parents, teachers, or mentors help with this mindset? This is such a great question, and I'm going to have two answers, and one is probably easy to hear as a parent, and probably one is not so much. The easy one is that, we giving the constant feedback, and I'm sure many parents here do this. You look at all the successful people, whether with its ADHD, dyslexia on the spectrum, have struggled with anxiety. A quick internet Google search will show you so many people have thrived with this neurodiversity. It has the ability to be a huge asset. But the hard answer is that sometimes we need to go through hard times. When I was failing out of college, I was 2,000 miles away from home, and I tried to blame my mom, and I tried to blame my dad, and I tried to blame everyone. And eventually, when real life hit, I had to look in the mirror, and I had to do the hard work. So there's only so much we can do as a parent and as family members to make sure we reverse this diagnosis. A lot of the mindsets we talked about will help, but sometimes we just need a kick in the tail from life. So that may not be easy to hear, but it's very helpful. All right. So a few more things to talk about. When you're an educator, there's certain things we can do to organize our courses to make sure our kids who are neurodiverse thrive. The first one is structure and consistency. This is a little bit of a silly example, but we worked with a high-level engineering school around here. And one of the professors had their assignments due for one type of assignment, so projects due at 11:59 a.m., and then the discussion posts were due at 11:59 p.m. And they had different due dates and different things for each type of assignment. We just lined those up. Like every single discussion post is at Friday due at 11:59 p.m. Every single project throughout the year is due Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. And once we line those up, work completion improved by like 25%, right? And assignments turned in. So having a clear cadence is very helpful. Again, it's not going to make your courses boring because the assignments can be exciting. We just know what's expected of us, and we struggle with that gray. So black and white is very helpful. Next, we're going to talk about this a lot, but having all your materials in one place, whether it's rubrics, instructions. Right now, a lot of times as a parent or as working with a student in college or in high school, these things are all over the place on different portals. I'm going to show you how to put everything in one place. And then again, how can we weave in accountability checkpoints? One of my biggest pet peeves in working with coaching. So here's a quick coaching one of how we can communicate with our athletes. One of my biggest pet peeves, and probably this was me growing up too, it's when a coach gives an athlete instructions on how to run a play or how to do something and talks to them for 1 or 2 minutes. And then the athlete does it wrong and the coach gets really frustrated. I was that kid, right? So anytime we can give the instructions while walking them through the play, while diagramming it on the board, giving to them in multiple modalities is very successful. Same thing with teaching, not just saying it verbally, writing it down. Multiple modalities tends to be very successful when we're giving instructions. If you're on the webinar and if you can see the screen, I just pulled up an example of a superstar teacher/professor and how they organize their course schedule. If you're just listening, how it looks is that the weeks there's one sheet of paper at the very front of the Schoology, the Google Classroom, or whatever it is. There's just one sheet of paper. And it says week 1, what we're doing that week, what the homework is, and then the due date. Everything is hyperlinked to this one sheet of paper. So if it's an essay, it says essay, hyperlinked in are the instructions on a different sheet of paper. And then right next to it, rubric. The rubric is hyperlinked. And then when it's due or where to submit, it's hyperlinked. Everything is on one front sheet of your paper and hyperlinked in and broken out very nicely. It's really hard to find a lot of different things if you're a student with an executive function challenge trying to weave through everything. I know this is something we've worked with a lot of schools on and how to really help teachers build this out. But having one front sheet of paper where everything is hyperlinked in, that's well organized, will give you so much bang for your buck as an educator. And it's really helpful. So beyond that, having predictable structure when things are due and then consistent deadlines. If you need additional help with this on our website, and then also there's a place to sign up for our newsletter, we'll send out things like a neurodivergent syllabus, how to organize a class, a Google Classroom or a Schoology or a Canvas or a D2L or something like that, your school learning management system. But this is a great way to do it. Also, if you're a coach as well, and set a practice plan home. Same thing with you if you're a syllabus. I know there's a few high school teachers and college professors here. In your syllabus, if you can have a syllabus where you hyperlink things in. So here's my email is hyperlinked in. Here's how I want assignments cited that is hyperlinked in and it shoots you to the website that you want to use. Here's how I want to be advocated to. A lot of our students don't know how to advocate respectfully for accommodations or extra time. Having a script there. Having everything in one place that our student always comes back to is very helpful. If there's a consistent challenge in your classroom, put it in your syllabus, but hyperlink it to the resource that where you want it to go to. We're big on helping our students be successful. Let's make it easy on you. Take time to build it in, hyperlink it, and they'll know exactly where to go and what to do with it. Again, we have examples of this if anybody needs them. So that's how to organize your course. Build in routines throughout your classroom if you're struggling with behavior management or whatever, but build in routines, but also build in routines for assignments and clearly post things online. As someone who's a teacher, but also with an executive function deficit, I show it to several people, and I want to make sure it's crystal clear to everybody before I post it for my classroom. This small discipline has opened up a lot of free time and has opened up my inbox as well. The last thing I want to talk about is how to do school. Kids who are quote unquote good at school, they understand the game. A lot of us with executive function challenges, we just don't. When I was failing out of college, I had someone else on the football team come talk to me. And they said something along the lines of, why don't you go talk to your professor? My response was, can you do that? I had no concept of how to do school. There's a few things that we can teach our students explicitly with, and they'll understand how to do school and thrive. The first one is how to study. So common complaint among teachers and parents is my student doesn't know how to study. If you're working or if you have a neurodiverse child or student, I don't have a good answer for you because we all learn so differently. I know I would not try to read a book. That would be ridiculous for me, but I've been able to make it through grad school and I devour research. My attention is so poor that I can't sit down and read, but I can devour information through Audible. So I walk around the block, I stop every 10 minutes and I write down what I gained from that. And that's my system of how I acquire information. It's not good, it's not bad, it is what it is. So how our students can find this and how we can fast forward this process a little bit is asking them a lot of questions. So let's say they got a B on a Spanish test. Instead of saying, I'm so proud of you for this B on the Spanish test, we can ask a bunch of questions. Here's how it could look. So I'm so proud of you. You got a B on a Spanish test. How many days in advance did you start studying? Was the environment loud or was it quiet that you studied in? Did you study with the group or did you study by yourself? Was it in office hours, a structured study session, or was it more loose? The more questions we can ask, our students can start to see trends and we can line up the dots, and this self-assessment is huge for so many of our kids. We all learn and acquire information differently, but we gain that through questions that people ask us. So that's a great way to think about studying. The next to get from information from short-term to long-term information is short, frequent study sessions. Studying for 10 minutes on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We tend to that information goes from short-term to long-term memory and it sticks, right? Versus studying for an hour the night before the test. We're spending less time studying, but we're gaining the information. Active studying, and this is my favorite one, my favorite study technique for high-level students. So we struggle, and there's a lot of anxiety getting prepared for high-level tests. So let's say you have a Calculus 2 course that you teach. Having students get all that information for the test, let's say it's over 3 chapters, if they can take all the information and distill it onto one note card, well, the fact that they synthesized it, that means that they're probably going to learn it. Also, it gives the students a start point and an end point. If you have a kid that struggles with anxiety, we'll just go on and on and on. We'll never know when to stop. So taking this big information, synthesizing it onto a note card or a one-pager is very, very helpful. It's a great way to study, and it gives us an endpoint knowing that we're prepared for the test. We have examples of that if anybody ever needs one. The next thing students don't know how to do is they don't know how to advocate. Parents bust their tail to get all these assessments and reports to make sure that their kids have the accommodations that they need to be successful. And then we all get frustrated, and I know I did as a teacher, when our students don't advocate. Well, our students don't advocate because, first of all, they're intimidated. They don't know what to ask for so many times. They don't know what they need, and they feel like there's a stigma. So how do we go around that? Well, the first thing we do is we role play. So teaching a kid how to walk up to a professor or a teacher with their shoulders back, head high at the appropriate time, looking them in the eye and clearly communicating exactly what they need in a respectful, non-entitled way is a skill that is essential and it will set them up for success in so many different areas. We do that through role play, and we do it over and over and over until they feel good. Then we love them up like crazy when they do it. So an example of this is learning to walk up to a teacher with your shoulders back, head high at the end of class, saying, hi, Mrs. Webb, I'm not sure how to complete the second part of the project, and I can't stay after school to see you any day this week. I was wondering if I could check in with you at lunch or before school. Teaching our students and role-playing with them how to advocate is essential, and they're probably not going to have it unless we practice it over and over. Give them structure up front, ease off on the back end. Same thing with email. I know I can't tell you how many students have emailed me with the entire email in the subject line. And there's a lot of things that came off as disrespectful when my kids weren't trying to be disrespectful. They were trying to advocate for their needs. Teaching them how to break down in the different components of what a respectful email advocating for extra time looks like is essential. So break it down. We have a bunch of scripts on our website if you need them, or just give your student a script, save it in the draft portion of their inbox, and now they have it for the rest of the year. It's a great tactic for special education teachers or counselors at the beginning of the year when there's not a high workload as well. Last thing I like to end on is there's a lot coming out right now for learning, and I do this for a lot of our very high-achieving students and parents and athletes. There's a lot coming out in neuropsych and learning with students with executive function that mirrors exercise science. So we know that if you bust your tail and you go to the weight room and lift heavy weights, or you run a half marathon, you have to let your body rest the next day, or it won't grow. You won't improve. Well, that's the same with the brain and with learning for students with executive function challenges. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being barely working at all, and 10 being busting your tail, focusing as hard as you can, as teachers and educators, we want to get our kids up to a 7 or 8. We want them working as hard and as focused as they possibly can. But then we have to let them rest. And that's how we see maximum learning occur. Rest could be a 5-minute movement break. Rest could be after you have a big assignment, taking a day or two to kind of have low-level instruction. This can look a lot of different ways, but we have to work as hard as we can, and then we have to come back down to a 1 or a 2 to really grow. That is what I have. You can see on the slide, if you are watching, there is a QR code for educators on how to get a bunch of the resources I speak to. There's a QR code for parents on how to get a bunch of resources I spoke to. If you are listening, if you just Google hello@untappedlearning.com, if you email hello@untappedlearning.com, we will send you some resources to help you be successful. So thank you so much for your time. I'd love to do some question and answer.
Thank you so much, Brandon. That was very informative and inspiring. And I got a lot of great questions from our viewers today. But before we start jumping into the Q&A, I'd just like to thank Brain Balance once more for sponsoring this webinar. And I'd also like to share the final results from today's poll question. What executive function challenge do you see most often in the classroom? And here's what you said. The top of the list was attention and focus, which was probably no surprise after hearing your presentation, followed by impulse control difficulties, then time management struggles, and then poor planning and organization. And with that, I'd just like to jump into our first Q&A, and that is about planning. What do you do with students who need to track assignments, but they don't want to use a paper or digital planner? Do you have any suggestions on how they can organize their assignments?
Yeah, so this is always a hard one because I know a lot of people ask me, what is the correct organizational strategy? Well, there is no correct organizational strategy. I'm assuming almost everybody here has a different one, and we all made it here, right? But if you don't have the luxury of going one-on-one with a student, it's I know I do everything through Google Calendar and reminders. I do everything electronic because I lose paper. And so that's what works for me. And the question is, what do you want to teach in your classroom? And what do you want that routine to be? Is it every Monday morning when they walk in? If it's a 1-to-1 school where everybody has a Chromebook or a computer, they copy the assignments into their Google Calendar. Whatever works best in your classroom, if you're an educator, that's just what we have to do for large groups. If you have the luxury, again, of being a special education teacher or working with someone in a small group, then we can get more individualized. What we do is we have students choose their organization system, but then we tell them after they choose it, we will hold them accountable for the rest of the year. I'm the type of person that I'll download all 50 organization apps in the iTunes store. I'll use every one for 2 weeks because it's exciting. I'll switch it up, and then I'm more disorganized than ever. The correct organizational one is the one you update weekly, and then there's accountability weaved in. Another quick component of that is what's the positive reinforcement if it's just your child or a small group that you can weave in if they do the task. We want to associate that with positivity.
And you mentioned the importance of exercise for students who have these executive function deficits. And one question we received was, should our schools start the day with 15 minutes of activity? And if so, what kind of exercise? Do you have any recommendations for elementary through high school that they can do?
Well, first of all, I'm a big proponent of what movement does. And sometimes exercise gets thrown in there, and it may not even be necessarily exercise. So I try not to overthink it. So any type of movement is going to be really helpful for a lot of our kids. It could be walking to school. It could be walking for 15 minutes. I know we do a lot of walk and talks with our kids just to get them moving and get the brain reset. We would love it if that heart rate got up for 15 minutes, but try not to overthink it. Anytime we can work movement into our classroom, which is super scary as a teacher. I know I had this huge mental shift, it's really easy to lecture for an hour. It's really hard to find ways to lecture for 10 minutes and then build in movement. But it's going to get you a lot further. So long answer to say, don't overthink it. Movement any way possible. If your school is receptive to having the kids move before school, I mean, it's such a huge game changer for learning and behavior and kind of all the above. Just healthy, happy kids.
And we did have one teacher ask, what are some ways to communicate effectively with the parents of my students with ADHD, as they often show signs themselves and have a hard time managing parenting? So do you have any tips for those educators when they are reaching out to the parents trying to get some help and trying to explain what's going on with their student in the classroom and what they can do to facilitate growth?
Yeah. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree sometime. And so, I mean, it all depends on what you're trying to help them with. So like, let's say it's routines. I know something that I did. I just had like a Google Doc. And when a parent asked a question and I found a helpful article or a helpful piece of research that was, applicable to their situation, I just copied and pasted that link in there. So what I found with a lot of parents is that though it'll be an Attitude's a great example. I had a bunch from Attitude, but they're very receptive to like little research articles. And then when I weave in my 2 cents into it, then they were really receptive because they could see it was research-based. It wasn't just my opinion. So if I was helping a family, like, here's why you should plan on Sunday night, or here's why you should have a movement routine or a homework routine, I would put in a link. And then it tended to be just super helpful for them. And it didn't put all the pressure on me. And it wasn't a me versus them thing. It's like, here's what the research is. And here's how you can help.
And then we also received a question about if a teenager didn't really get a lot of these executive function skills early on, how do you implement them? And what's the motivation for them to learn? Is it, it's never too late, but how do you help motivate them to understand that?
Great question. Such a good question. Well, and I'm sure many people here, like myself, have seen just the skyrocketing numbers the past couple of years. And that can be associated to a bunch of different things, but so many kids struggle now with these challenges. I mean, it's never too late, right? Like, I had to start doing my hard work at like 18, 19, 21, 22, right? So it's never too late. It's working on one thing and one thing at a time. And then, I mean, what we found has helped is reinforcing the freedom that they get, because a lot of our teenagers are really after that freedom, and just the positive reinforcement mixed with the accountability. Whenever it can be black and white, we tend to do really well with that. If you have a more specific question on that, feel free to email me. But it's a lot of love, accountability, patience, and looking for the skills they don't have and explicitly teaching them. And at the end of the day, we can sleep well as educators and as parents knowing we did everything we could, and they're going to have to take the next step eventually.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today, but we just wanted to thank you again for joining us and contributing your voice to this ADHD community.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm very grateful to be here.
And thanks today to our listeners. Make sure you don't miss future Attitude webinars, articles, or research updates by signing up to receive our free email newsletters at attitudemag.com/newsletters. And if you're listening in replay or podcast mode, please visit attitudemag.com and search podcast number 464 to access the webinar resources. And if you support the work we're doing here at Attitude to strengthen the ADHD community, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for Attitude Magazine for yourself or to share with a teacher or a loved one who could benefit from greater ADHD understanding. Thank you and have a great afternoon. Thanks again, Brandon.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.
You love podcasts, the stories, the laughs, the unexpected turns. But when this episode ends, the silence starts. Not anymore. Audiobooks.com turns that silence into your next great adventure. With over 450,000 titles, from bestsellers to hidden gems, your love for listening just found its new best friend. And because you already know the joy of audio, we're giving you 3 free audiobooks to start your journey. Imagine your favorite podcast, now with unlimited episodes. That's audiobooks.com. Keep the story going. Sign up for your free trial at audiobooks.com/podcastfree today. Because for podcast lovers like you, the end of an episode is just the beginning. That's audiobooks.com/podcastfree.